Here we go.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm your host, David Susan, and thank you for being with me today. I'm excited to have our guest with us today. This is Andrea Miller. She's the CEO of Leadwell Company. They're a global coaching and consultancy focused on leadership development, organizational resilience, and the human side of AI, which we're going to talk about today. She's worked with leaders from more than 50 countries. She's worked with the World Health Organization, the UN Refugee Agency, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the U.S. Postal Service, and the New York City Department of Health, as well as leading tech innovators like Siemens Healthcare, Healthineers. I totally messed that up. Siemens Healthineers and
It's a
AI
hard one.
20. It is. And AI 2030. We're going to have to ask about that one. Her thought leadership's been featured in entrepreneur.com, Newsweek, Fast Company, among others. With a background spanning international management, social entrepreneurship, and executive coaching, Andrea helps organizations navigate culture change, build trust, and lead with confidence in the age of AI. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be here.
Man, if I could read the intro, jeez. Even though I practice it, I still mess up.
I told
But
you, just get close to make something up. I would have been fine, really.
I know it's just there. So let's start. I want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
Oh, what do I do? Oh, God, that's a hard
Yeah.
one. I do a lot of different things. Primarily I'm a coach, but I also do training around emotional intelligence, cross-cultural issues, AI, you name it. I mean, a gamut of things. If it's the human-related side of work really is really where I live and what I'm passionate about because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this today, it impacts everything. Our humanity just really is at the heart of work, but because we are people. And so, yeah, I know that's kind of a babbling response. Sorry, I should have a better answer
Oh,
for
I
that.
love it, and I think that's a bigger. It's so funny. More and more, I say it, and other people talk about humanity, and it's a word that's coming up more and more lately. Tell me, I want to hear more about what that means to you when you say it or when other people say it's about humanity. Because, like I said, 10 years ago, I didn't hear that word.
When I talk about it in this context, when we talk about it in a work context, I just we can't separate out who we are as human beings from the people who come into the office. What is going on in all aspects of our lives comes into our work. And I think now more than ever with AI and all the disruption that's happening and all the stress that people are under, we need to remember that there's a human that's involved in all this. And also for companies to be successful, that human needs to operate at their best. So, there is a strategic advantage to remembering it too, but we're human beings. And if we can't remember that, then really what are we doing all this for, quite honestly?
Now, do you think this is in your career, whether doing what you do now or just your career in general, do you think this term, this idea has changed, or is there more of a requirement to change than,
Mm.
let's say, 15, 20 years ago?
I think there's more. I love that you said it that way. I think there's more of a requirement to change. Well, I think it's changed, and therefore there's more of a requirement to change. I think we really have become more about the bottom line, and you see what's happening right now with the layoffs and the lack of hiring and just kind of the chaos in the workplace, the lack of trust, and everything post-COVID. I think is a lot harder too for folks, and I think there's a requirement to change. I think we really do need to be more intentional about it because it's really easy to forget with all this discussion around AI and how do we operationalize it and how do we become more productive. We forget that there are human beings on the other side of it. And if we truly want to be at our best, if we truly want to succeed, as individuals and companies, I think we need to remember that human side of everything.
Now, it's funny, years ago, I had first heard the term human capital.
Mm.
And I kind of
Funny
blew
term,
off
isn't it? Yeah, yeah,
but I didn't really think about it. Just go, oh, human capital. It was kind of a buzzword for a while. And then I was in
yeah,
training, corporate trainings, they would talk about it, human capital, human capital. And then one day I was driving in my car and I thought, what does it really mean? And I really thought about human capital
yeah,
and the idea that humans, people are, I hate to say capital because it sounds like it cheapens it, but such a valuable investment in a
hmm
company. Do you think, as you look at, we talk about humanity today and human capital, do you think there's still that alignment? Do you think it's changed? Do you think we've
yeah.
forgotten about that? Especially, you mentioned AI, we talk about AI. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think with AI, I think people are forgetting about it. Well, I think there's two things also, and then going back to COVID, I think the fact that people physically aren't there has changed that dynamic to some degree too. We don't have that interaction that we used to have. We don't have that interaction of humanity that we used to have. And I think with AI, a lot of people, not all, but a percentage, are thinking, oh, we can get rid of these people that are so expensive to have in our offices and replace them with AI. And yes, and no. So, you can, but I think at what price? And I think there is a price because, well, we can get into it in more detail as we go on, but AI will only get you so far. We really need to invest in human beings and that human capital, as you so kindly put it.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's just talk about it now because I know, like in your
Yeah.
intro, right? The last part of your intro said you help organizations navigate culture change, build trust, especially in the age of AI. So tell me a little bit about what you are seeing to follow up on the statement you made of how AI is impacting and why the investment in people is still so critical.
I think AI is, obviously, we see the numbers. Well, if you're paying attention to it to the degree that I'm paying attention to it, there is layoffs that have already started to happen. There's hirings that aren't happening. There's a capital investment that needs to be recouped. And, that productivity piece, if you want to have your earnings, to be at a certain level, so your stock goes up, you wind up thinking about, okay, what can I get rid of if you're putting all this money into AI? And people think it's the humans. And I think they saw that with Klarna when they actually had to bring back the customer service people they got rid of to use, not all of them, but a percentage when they started using AI in lieu of actual human beings. But that's just one piece of it. I think people don't realize the full scope of AI. So I think it's a mixed bag of, how people are approaching it. There's a level of mistrust, distrust. There's a lack of training. There's varying numbers about how well this stuff is being implemented and what the ROI actually is. So, that's also quite complicated. But if you don't train your staff to use it well, of course your return on investment is going to be poor. And if you think you're going to get rid of your staff, um, that is another problem. So you have people who are working who really are not at their best because they're worried about losing their jobs. There's a lack of communication, and we all know what that's like, with any culture change. I think a lot of AI is change management. So if you're not managing that well, if you're not talking to your staff about what it means, including maybe some of them losing their jobs, obviously it's not going to go well. So
So behind the scenes, the leaders you work, consult with, what are they saying and thinking about AI in the future? I mean, because
it's
it,
yeah, yeah.
because I think you put out the oh, what's a word? The false, not just the facade, but the happy face on the outside. But behind the scenes, what are they really thinking in your experience?
It is a mix. Some of them don't really even understand it themselves, quite honestly. They don't even use it themselves, so they don't fully understand it themselves. And there's different data around it. obviously there's a real push for a return on investment. It really is what people are looking at, during earnings calls. Was AI mentioned? Are they using it? Are they implementing it well? So, people know they need to use it. They know they need to use it well. And they also, a lot of people care about their employees and they want to keep their employees. So how do you maximize usage so that you really are seeing a return on investment and a different way of using it and a different form of innovation? And this is, I think, really what I see is the issue. We can't, AI is fairly generic. There's a limit to how far it'll go, and that's on purpose to some degree. The algorithms really are in trying to, they don't want to be, as they say, too spicy, except for Grok, which is, just, in a
I
world
see.
unto itself. Spicy. Yeah, that's being kind. But most of them, if you look at the outputs that we get, they're fairly generic. You need to be able to prompt them well to get more out of it. That said, there's a lot happening now with AI agents and a lot of technology, makes my head spin actually what's going on right now in terms of what's coming out of it. But unless you know how to use it well, and I'll be honest, I struggle with too. And that's one of the reasons why I went into this is I'm a bit of a technophobe, and I push myself to use it. So if I can use it, anyone can use it. But how well we use it, what we get out of it, is the bigger question. So it's a mixed bag with all these leaders in terms of their expectations. They know they need to be using it and using it well. Most want to keep their employees, but they also know that if they're spending all this money on AI, they damn well better see an output. And if they're
Yeah.
not seeing an output, they need to get rid of staff. So it really becomes a numbers game.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears just a little bit. You work with leaders, you work with companies, you've worked large organizations. What I almost find with anyone that works with someone else is they already have in their own mind kind of a leadership philosophy that comes through as they work with others and coach. Do you have a leadership philosophy of your own? And if so, where did it come from?
Leadership philosophy, that's such an interesting way of putting it. I mean, for me, it really is about, the human on the other side of, in this case, the screen. I guess my philosophy is, we all have unlimited potential. How do we get rid of the noise and help them achieve that potential? How do we get some clarity around the goals and make sure they're achieving it? So I guess it really is that limitless sense. And, I'm a bit of an optimist, surprisingly. So, I think we really can always do better. So I guess that kind of is part of my philosophy. And how do I, when I work with clients, provide the best, help them get there? So,
And that's a great perspective, though, is having that optimism in your own life, your own business. Um, is there a moment that you can recall that really tested you? That I know there's tons of them,
oh
but
yeah, go on, go
but
on. I'm sorry, I
but
shouldn't.
maybe but let's say it didn't go well, but it became a turning point for who you are today.
Oh goodness, I've had a couple of them. I've had a couple of big ones. Because I do think in
Share
my
one
life.
or
So,
two, three. I'm
yeah,
open to that.
how much time do we have,
Whatever
David?
you feel.
I think of my life in chapters, but in terms of not going well, I did have this 5-year period in my life that really kind of. I've had a couple of periods in my life that changed things, but this one, if we're looking at things that didn't go well, that would probably be the one. I My mom got diagnosed with an incurable form of cancer, so I decided emotionally to quit my job. Went back without a job. Well, I had a job temporarily with the organization with the UN, but then I wound up having my own health issues. I got hit by a car. I had during a 5-year period, 3 surgeries, lost both parents. It was pretty hard to
Oh my gosh.
massive understatement. But it changed me. But I do have this philosophy of optimism, hope, because I realize if I give up hope, and it's something that kind of is a through line with right now with AI and what people are going through with career change and careers being upended is, if you give up hope, then what do you have? It really, is so I needed to make something out of it. And that's actually how I got into working with Siemens Healthineers. I decided, I had such bad patient experiences. I wanted to do something with it. I wanted to change it. And not only mine, but my parents. So I wound up becoming a patient experience expert and working with them for a while, but then COVID happened. And so that ended. And then I wound up getting involved in coaching because I could see first health coaching because I knew that if I didn't feel well, I couldn't work well. But then I realized that wasn't enough. I needed a different kind of challenge. And then I got my executive coaching and career coaching certifications. And that's my latest iteration, but I've had a few iterations. But again, it is that through line of hope and uh, maybe misguided optimism that, just keeps me going through it, because if we don't take action and try to find a way through that's positive, I don't like what I'm left with. So
Yeah,
I'm choosing
yeah.
positive. Yeah.
I love that. How about, in the name of the podcast, right? Inside the leader's mind, and what's in the way becomes the way.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, we
Um,
don't want to go into my mind, David. That's just a scary
just a
place.
little bit, just a little bit. But
Mhm.
was there also, I was am fascinated by people, not only how they got to where they are, right? Because, you had a progression, you talked about that, but sometimes there is a core thread of who we've been most of our life
Mhm.
and sometimes something shapes us or impacts us. Is there anything that comes to
Yeah.
mind when you think about that you're willing to share that, maybe that's determined who
Yeah,
you
no,
are
no,
as a
no.
person?
It's something that I came to the understanding of. Actually, while my mom was still alive, I wound up testing into this high school in New York, this science high school, and I hate science. And my mother, being the Jewish mother that she was, always made me feel badly that I didn't want to go there. But I wound up realizing at a certain point that that was actually the best place for me, because all of a sudden I'm in this different environment with people from literally all over the world. And different socioeconomic backgrounds and all of these different perspectives. And that I realized became a through line. I didn't understand it at the time because I grew up in a housing project in the Bronx, so I had a very small world up until then, and it broadened it. And I didn't get my passport until I was almost 30, and then
Oh my
after
God.
that, I know, insane, right? Because I certainly have made up for it since then. I've lived in a couple of countries and have gone to quite a few more, and then my graduate work is in intercultural management, international intercultural management. So I would say, it is that through line of people and the diversity of opinions and that love of cultures is really, I think really I've come to understand that that's kind of my through line. I, just love the thrill of having a conversation with somebody else, hopefully helping somebody else if that's, what I'm there for, um, and understanding their perspective, no matter where they're from. So,
What about with clients that you work with? Because now, it's a global economy and it's a global work environment, and you have all these cultures coming in. It, what's been your experience and maybe different industries? I don't know if there's different industries you work in, if you see different trends with that, but have you seen any significant difference because of the cultural mix now?
I don't know if it's, well, and I did spend over a dozen years at the UN, so I'm kind of used to it, and it is what I studied. So for me, that's kind of the normal, but and I really do love that. That was really one of my greatest thrills, was when, I would sit at a table with people from so many different countries everyone speaking multiple languages and finding ways to communicate.
That's crazy.
And it is crazy. I have a client right now who, she works in global HR, and, she was talking about that, having to lead a team that's global, different backgrounds, different personalities, and also some of the gender dynamics that come into play. And, it's hard without question. This is not a fits all answer, but, we have to be aware of it. I think it all starts with awareness and recognizing that these differences are coming into play and just, finding a way through with different people, different groups, and also recognizing that sometimes it's not going to land well. But one of the things I always come back to is the EQ of it all. That, we have to understand where people are coming from and really ask when we don't know, if something's landing well. I always like to say we may be speaking the same language, but that doesn't mean we're understanding it the same way. And we have I think one of the hardest parts with working in a global environment is most of the people in that room speak English and they speak it well, but they don't understand it the same way. There's a great book that I love. I think it's called Between Us by this author, Batya Mesquita. She's a Dutch researcher, professor, and she talks about the culture of emotions. So, it's just, even if we're speaking the same language, the interpretation may be different. So it's helpful to keep that in mind. And it certainly adds a layer of complication onto things sometimes, because what people are saying isn't necessarily what they're doing or feeling or understanding. But that said, and I'm sure you've seen the research on this, having a diversity of opinions really usually leads to better outcomes. We just get a different kind of way of thinking when we have different voices in the room from different places. So,
It's funny how people fight that, but then you look at most relationships. Like if I look at almost everyone I know in a relationship, they marry at an opposite because their
yeah,
strength is, it's they've got a strength, but then they have a weakness and they tend to be attracted to the other person. And, it's the opposites attract, but we get it
yeah,
in our personal life, but we don't think about it in our personal life. It just is. But then we get in the work environment and we're like, oh, but they're different than me, than I am. And sometimes people have a problem with it. And I think
yeah.
it comes back to humanity,
Mm.
right? Emotional
Yeah.
intelligence, EQ. But humanity is they're just people. They're just people. It's just,
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's just that they were raised in another country or another culture, but
Which is
they're,
fascinating if you take the time to find out, but it's complicated.
yeah. Yeah. What do
And
you think?
sometimes we don't like complications. So,
Well, that's true because we like what we know. And I think most people are uncomfortable with what they don't know. And if they don't know about another culture,
yeah.
they don't get it. And that's the whole thing about empathy, right? It's truly understanding what it is like to be them in their shoes. And I think people struggle with that. They don't take the time and the patience. It's my
Yeah.
opinion on that. But what do
No,
you
I
think?
agree. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think, as you've worked with organizations, especially some of these global or international, what do you think the best leaders do that others aren't? What
I
differentiates them?
Well, I think you just said it. I had a boss when I worked at one of the UN agencies. Um, just a lovely human being and brilliant. He was, the number two in the organization, and he treated everyone the same. Always had a smile for people. Always had a kind word for people. Worked harder than anyone else I knew, but and almost gave him. Well, he actually wound up in the hospital. I think he might have given himself a heart attack doing it, but everyone loved him. People would do anything for him, and he was a good leader. He really understood the people who were working for him, and this is a global environment. So, there are those differences that he had to manage, but people respected him for it. So I think, when I think of a great leader, I always think of him, my old boss. Just shout out to Paul. Yeah, just a good human being.
You think that the people that you've worked for, would he be one that has had the biggest influence on you, or was there someone else as a
Honestly, it's the opposite that had the biggest influence on me. Early in my career, I had some really awful human beings who I worked for. Some screamers, I had one HR department apologize to me when I quit, because this woman should not have been working in, where she was working. And, it teaches you a valuable lesson of what not to do. But but going back to Paul, by that point it was, a bit later in my career, and I just respected it so much, and I respected him so much. And, you just learn to value these things. And I think that is so critical today to have those reminders of how we should treat other human beings. And that, you get more from people when you treat them with humanity.
A simple concept, but not easy. I always say it's simple, but not easy. Like
I, I,
you say, oh,
I
that's all you
say
have.
the same thing, right? Great minds,
All you have
yeah.
to do. My analogy is it's kind of like getting fit. It's simple, but not easy. All you have to do
I
is eat
know.
right and exercise more, right?
Oh
All
yeah,
you
that's
have to
it.
do is
Got
treat
it.
all you have to do is treat this other person like a human being and treat them with respect, and they'll jump through hoops. They'll do anything uh, for a leader that respects and values them. And people struggle with it. That's fascinating. Why do you
It
think
is.
they do?
Well, and I was going to respond. I was
Yeah,
already
go for it.
thinking about it. I think some people just aren't hardwired to do that. Some people, going back to your question of me, some people had bad role models and don't think they should be like that. They don't think that's the sign of a good leader. A lot of leaders, and I'm sure you know this in your work, weren't trained to be good managers, to be good leaders. They're just, figuring it out, and they're just responding, and they can't handle the pressure, and they take it out on other people around them. And, there's all sorts of reasons why people behave the way they do.
Yeah. And it's funny, you kind of alluded to it. You didn't say these words, but most leaders, it's on the job training.
Mm.
And the analogy I use is think about a pro athlete, like say a golfer, and the only time you practice is during the tournament. Like while you're
That's a great,
playing, you're
yeah,
practicing,
yeah,
and you can't. And what they do, in athletics, you practice hours, thousands, right? To compete for like the Olympics, let's say, for that one event. But
yeah.
in leadership and in most of our jobs, it, it's you ask people how they learned it. They took a class.
If they even did
Training
that.
is not transformation, right? Training is not transformation. And and then it's on the job training. And I'm like, but you can't learn while you're doing, right? It's and people say you can, but the problem is it literally takes way too long. It's years and years and years, and you're learning the wrong habits, the bad habits.
Yeah, no, and there's really no time for that reflection, that self-reflection.
Yeah.
As I heard you, as I was listening to you, I was like, yeah, they're just doing. They're not being and reflecting on how they're being with others. So how are they supposed to change? How are they supposed to get better if all they are is doing and responding and reacting?
Well, the responding reacting, right? It's habit. So you have a bad
Yeah.
manager. Let's say you have a bad early manager, and it's like you don't, and so you either go the opposite, like you did. Hey, I knew what I don't want to be, or you think that's the way management is, and then they become a manager, and it's kind of like parenting. You go opposite, or you do the same as your parents did. Um, Scary. It's scary if
Yeah, no,
people
it
don't
is.
take the time.
And companies don't take the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies I worked for that, kept people in roles when they knew that they were really
Yeah.
toxic. So,
Yeah. Well, it comes back to human capital, recognizing
yeah.
that you're investing in the people and it's your one of your biggest investments. And my feeling is if you raise the bar on everyone,
Hmm.
what would the impact be on your organization, whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit government? And I don't think people look at it the bigger picture.
And I think that's a perfect tie into, kind of how I feel about AI. You can get rid of all your staff and replace them with AI, but you're just going to have that level of mediocrity, if even that. Whereas if we invest in human beings and train them to really use things well and make sure we're investing in their well-being so they're able to think more broadly and, use the EQ principles around these things. So, we have that innovation. I mean, I don't know about you, but, I've done a lot of things, and when I sit down in front of that machine and put my prompts in or think about whatever it is that I'm thinking about, I'm pulling in all these different things that AI can't pull out because it has never experienced those. So we
Right.
want to be able to ensure that people are at their best, that we raise that bar, as you say, that we raise the level of anything we do, whether it's man or machine.
So, what advice? Couple last questions here. What advice would you have to leaders today, especially as we know AI is inevitable?
Oh, okay.
That's the question. Sorry. Yeah. What
That's the question.
advice
No,
would you
it's
have? Sorry.
okay.
What advice
No,
would
it's
you
fine.
have?
It's absolutely fine. I thought there was like something deeper.
That was deep enough, wasn't it?
It is. It's too broad. No,
Yeah. Just
but I do think, we have to have conversations about this and really, um, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, one is they really do need to have conversations with their staff because their staff is already talking about it and worried about losing their jobs and thinking about the future. And I saw something recently, or heard something. It was another podcast because I didn't know about yours yet. So, of course, that's where I'd be spending my time. But they were talking about sorry. They were talking about the problem with AI. One of the problems with AI right now is really AI slop. We need new data. And that's human data. You need original thinking, and part of that comes from having people in your companies using it. And they're using people in companies to train the AI, so people automatically think that, well, if I give it this, then it's going to take my job, and I'm going to lose my job. And why would I want to train it? And so we need to start having honest conversations about the thinking, where we're going, and even if they don't know where they're going. But, it's going back, everything goes back to COVID. Going back to COVID, when they used to talk about the CEOs, the chief empathy officers, we need to really let people feel heard. We need to be able to communicate with them well so that they know what's happening, so they're less stressed, so they can perform at their best. And we need to train them. I mean, one of the things that is pretty apparent to me as, I do this stuff is that a lot of companies aren't investing in going back to what you're saying about raising the bar. They're not investing in getting people to a baseline of training so that they're using these things well. So, they're putting stuff in and, they're saying garbage in, garbage out. So they're not getting things that are really at a level and they don't understand it fully. But if you have people operating at their best with AI or anything, with each other, then obviously you're going to get better results, better responses. So those are the things that I would be thinking about. How do we make sure people feel, well, psychologically safe to try things and do things and be in the office that they're in? And how do we get them to a level that they're able to really do great work?
and not be a denier, because if you're a
Yeah,
denier, you're never going to do those things that you're talking about. So it's being open.
yeah, exactly.
It's.
Communication. Yeah.
I have a client. They have a $1.5 billion commitment to AI
Wow.
that they're training every employee. They're a global, huge corporation, and they're training every single employee. And they've made all in, and they're at the forefront,
Good
meaning
for them.
not building it. That's not they're not a tech company, but it's the understanding of we've got to be on board. And it's in every discussion, it's in every workshop I'm doing with them. It's like, how do we use AI? How do we leverage it? Because they get it, and I think they know if they're not doing what you're saying,
Yeah.
that they will fall behind because it's moving so fast, so fast. So yeah.
So fast. Yeah, no, it,
Anyway,
it really is. It makes my head spin sometimes.
it does. Well,
Yeah.
let me wrap with one last question here, and that question comes from, I remember my aunts and uncles would ask me, Dave, how are you? Fine. How's school? Fine. That was the whole conversation. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, why don't they ask me this? Or my kids, Dad, you don't know anything about me. And then I ask questions, and they're like, why are you so nosy? Well, what question do you want me to ask? So the question for you, Andrea, is what question do you wish people would ask you, but they just don't know to ask you?
Well,
And
I
then, of
think,
course, what
since
would the answer be?
oh, do I have to give an answer? It's going
Yeah.
back to this conversation, with AI. I mean, it's moving fast. And so how do we reimagine ourselves, our careers when things are moving faster than the plans we had. That's really, I think, what we need to be thinking about. I do like to take a forward view on this because, I have colleagues, clients who are losing their jobs. I was on a call yesterday with somebody who, yeah, they're getting rid of a bunch of staff in March. They just
Uh,
told, and you don't want to be in that position. So, what I've been talking about lately is these portfolio careers. Finding our strategic leverage, in this process, and really developing skills, a set of skills that no matter what will keep us employed, whether it's with a company or on our own. And really, and then go back to what I was saying before, it's all about like EQ and managing our own stress and all of this stuff. And, I get it, going back to what I said to you about, my difficult time, when everything kind of, and I know I can say kind of a bad word, when everything went to shit, I had to manage this. And, obviously I wasn't able to work very well when, I was dealing with my family and dealing with my own surgeries. And I had to really like manage myself and really think about where I wanted my future to go. And that's where a lot of people are right now. For me, I used to give myself these 24-hour pity parties. That was my maximum. I needed to feel the emotions. We can't deny, going back to what we talked about before, the empathy, the EQ. We can't deny what we're feeling, but we also can't get stuck there. So we need to make sure we are moving on, and we need to make sure when we move on that there's some sort of place to go, and, doing it now rather than when you get that notice like my colleague did, my client did yesterday. And so, I'm telling people to kind of test things, try different things, experiment with different things. I'm in a couple of communities. If you would have told me, you know, the technophobe that I was, that I would be doing this stuff, I would have just thought you were crazy. But, sometimes you just got to do it now. Do things that make you uncomfortable now. At the very least, you're going to be more valuable to your company if, they decide to keep you. You just will be one of the ones who moves up. But at the worst, you also have a backup plan. You have because the thing about chaos and the thing about where we are right now is there is a lot of opportunity in it. I see people making a lot of money using AI. There's a lot of really smart, mainly young innovators who are doing some things that I never even thought about. So the more we can tap into these different kinds of energy, the more we're more willing to open ourselves up to things that make us a little uncomfortable now rather than being very uncomfortable later.
yeah, yeah. And I think
That's
it
my
comes.
answer, David.
That's that's a short answer. And at the end of the day, though, what
Shortish.
I'm is shortish. It comes down to resilience and change. Change is
100%.
inevitable. Being willing to change and then being resilient to what that change is, because it's coming, it's happening faster and faster. Not just AI, but just how society, how life is changing. And I think leaders and humans need to be ready and accepting and not fight it. So,
So I just want to, if you don't mind, just go back to the resilience piece.
yeah,
The thing about resilience is a lot of people just aren't because they haven't had to be. And
right.
I'm sure you probably see it with a lot of leaders you've worked with. They work hard, I mean, really hard, and they just move up. And that's the process.
Yep.
And then what happens when, life just kind of says, nope, that ain't happening anymore. And I've talked to people like this. They don't know what to do, whereas I've had a number of challenges along the way that I had to respond to. So when I had, bigger challenges, I kind of knew how to manage it. I kind of intuitively knew how to manage it. It wasn't always smooth, and it wasn't always pretty, but I also I knew I could get through it. There was like this inner sense. And the other piece that I would say that I think is underrated is also asking for help. A lot of people, when these things happen, go it alone. And these are the times when we really need help the most. We need support, whatever that looks like. Just asking somebody, whether it's, how do you do this? or can you help me? And I say this as somebody when after the car, uh, I wound up having this massive neck surgery, and
Mm.
my sister's like, well, you have to come stay with me. You're in a fourth floor walk up, and I'm like, oh, and I was in a neck brace for 3 months, taking heavy duty pain meds. I needed help. I didn't really know how to ask for it, and that was the greatest gift I've ever gotten. Honestly, was learning how to ask for help, but it's hard. It's surprisingly hard for a lot of people.
And that comes to that resilience, right? You got to be willing to bounce back, and some people haven't had to. So,
Yeah,
well,
it's a challenge.
it is. It is. Well, you have been lovely. I've loved having you. What a great conversation. If someone wants to get in touch with you, learn more about you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Either my website, leadwellcompany.com, or, just email me, Andrea at leadwell.com, leadwellcompany.com, or, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I think that's where we found each other. Sign up for my newsletter.
And I'll make sure I put a link to all three of those in the show notes for those of you that are listening. Well, been a pleasure. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being with me. Please share this if you've enjoyed it. Invite some leaders to listen. Maybe they'll learn something, or maybe they'll become a guest. So, Andrea, thank you again for being with me.
Thank you, David. I really enjoyed this.
And folks, for Inside the Leader's Mind, I'm David Susan. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.